Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Block presented by Around the Block Network. We have a great show planned for you today, starting off with a couple headlines. First off, the women's and men's NCAA basketball conference finals are finishing up at the moment. With the next couple hours, we will see the 2022 NCAA tournament brackets finished, and play for that will be starting on Tuesday, March 15th. The top projected seeds at the moment are Gonzaga, Baylor, Kansas, and Arizona. But Ben and Tim will have the updates later for you coming up on the show here. And so then moving on to our second headline, we have the players with the PGA. The 2022 Players Tournament is underway at TPC Sawgrass. Some extreme weather has created rough terrain for the players and caused some delay. That being said, Sam Burns is currently in the lead at 8 under, while players like Paul Casey and Francesco Molinari are only within a couple strokes. Heading into baseball, baseball is officially back after they struck a new deal with their players to start the 2022 season. The season will consist of 162 games, and opening day starts April 7th. It will be an interesting to see how players will do coming into spring training camp on March 17th. There was some bad blood between the two sides of the organizations, the owners, and the players. But now that baseball is back, fans can look forward to competitive baseball. And to finish it off here, we have Deshaun Watson. The Houston Texans quarterback is back on the trading block. The NFL released a statement that the league would now no longer look into the cases of sexual assault. That being said, the star quarterback is on the trading block, and there are reports that the Texans have no plans to trade Watson within the AFC. The top two contenders as of right now are the New Orleans Saints and Carolina Panthers. We shall see what happens in the near future here of which teams are still interested in Watson, even though he is a top 10 quarterback in the league. Now, I want to break it down to the hockey group here, and we're going to give it over to Harrison and Sam. Harrison, Sam?
Thank you, Matt. What's up, guys? I'm Harrison. If you guys didn't meet me last week, this is Sam.
Hi guys, Sam here with my co-host Harrison. You can just follow me at SamDman12321, and we have a pretty good show ahead for you guys.
Yeah,
All
so
right, so
today we have a lot of things.
we're gonna jump into our first topic here, which is the Jack Eichel and the Vegas Golden Knights. Harrison, so far the Vegas Golden Knights have struggled with Jack Eichel in the lineup. They're 4-7-1 in the 12 games he's played, and he's only scored 8 points in those 12 games. Not bad. You do expect some rust coming off a pretty major neck injury like he had, but the team hasn't gelled the way a lot of people thought they would have. So what do you see from the Vegas Golden Knights that they're missing with the Jack Eichel in the lineup?
Well, first off, they're missing a lot of their main guys. So Mark Stone's missing from the lineup. That's their captain. I don't know. They're just kind of in a weird streak. It kind of seems like bad luck always follows Jack Eichel wherever he ends up. So obviously he was with the Buffalo Sabres for 7 seasons, and now he's with the Vegas Golden Knights. It took him a while this season to start playing, but he's played 12 games for them, and like you said, he's had 8 points, which isn't terrible, but it's not necessarily great for a player of his caliber because he was selected second overall, I believe. And yeah, so one of those losses that was under Eichel's tenure with the Golden Knights so far is his return to his former team, the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that loss in particular, it's really an interesting point because even though Buffalo has struggled, they've shown a lot of fight recently, and they wanted that one for sure going up against Eichel. There's clearly some animosity still there,
Oh
and I
yeah.
think it really showed the differences between the two clubs at that point, right? Even though Buffalo is not in the greatest spot, they still show a lot of grit and a lot of fight in that win. And
Oh yeah.
Vegas, they just haven't really put together, even with the supposed missing piece, right? They've always missed a first line center. That was always the thing they were missing. Now they have their first line center, and it just is underwhelming. And you mentioned Mark Stone. They are missing Mark Stone. He's a great player, but they still should be a pretty competitive team, and they just haven't been. And I wonder if it's just going to take a little bit of time to gel, or if it just doesn't fit. And I guess we'll see as that goes on. But do you think there's hope for them to make a run still? Do you think they're one of the best 5 teams in the league with Jack Eichel, or do you think it won't work and they need to retool a bit?
Well, definitely hockey right now. I mean, hockey's all about like recency, like who's hot right now, and Vegas is definitely not hot. I still think that they're going to make the playoffs just because they just have so many star players on their roster. And I feel like eventually they'll start winning again. I feel like they're just in kind of a little slump. But yeah, when Eichel returned to Buffalo the other night, the fans were very livid, lots of boos. Eichel even said at the end there that it took them 7 years to get that rowdy. I think he was a little salty though, because Buffalo did win that game 3-1. So yeah, just a little bit.
But it's interesting. I do think that Vegas with Jack Eichel is still a real cup contender because they've been great before. This is their first real struggle as a franchise, really. Ever since they were in the league, they've been exceeding expectations. And, this is the first time I think they've disappointed a little. And I think it's normal. But, are they one of the best 5 teams? They don't seem to be. And maybe with Mark Stone coming back, they fix it. But I wouldn't bank on it. We can talk about, the best 5 teams, or we can talk about the best 2 teams in the league, actually. So, looking at the top of the standings, do you think they compete with Colorado or Carolina?
Absolutely not. The Pacific Division's kind of weak this year anyway. But if Vegas makes it, they're going to make it into one of those last wild card spots, which a lot of the teams in the Central are competing for that. So I don't know. It's hard to tell now, but I feel like they're in it, or like, they're not.
Mm-hmm.
They're just kind of a weird team. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. But at the top of the standings, we have two teams, Colorado and Carolina. They have the same record right now. They recently just played against each other. Those are, I think, the 2 teams to beat in the league. But who do you think of those 2 teams is the best of them?
In my opinion, in the long run, Carolina Hurricanes. And I know a lot of people think the Avs are the best team this year. But I don't know. Carolina has always been pretty consistent with their roster, and I can just see them getting it done in the playoffs more than I can with Colorado. Colorado was insane last year, and they choked last year. So I'm kind of not – I can't really put my faith in the Colorado just yet. Carolina has proven to make it to conference finals. They've won a cup. So has Colorado, but they won a cup more recently. I just think, Carolina has more well-rounded players.
Yeah, you're certainly right. Carolina has the depth, and they recently played. Carolina won 2-0 against the Colorado. Certainly an interesting game. And I think you make a good point. The Hurricanes have the depth, but I think it's hard to compete with the Colorado star power. I mean, not just McKinnon and Landeskog and Rantanen, that top line, but also their defense with Makar. I mean, that's as much top-end talent as there is in the league. And they have been rumored even to add more scary stuff, but I think Colorado is the team to beat. I think their only real question mark, one is goaltending, but also they might have been padding their record against an easier Western Conference compared to Carolina.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like Carolina does beat them out with the goaltending. I think Frederik Andersen has played really well for Carolina this year. I also do think that Carolina has a better defensive core. I don't know. I just feel like Carolina is a lot more consistent, and defense wins you games. So very good defensive teams have been known to do better in the playoffs. I mean, I could name a bunch of teams that were really good in the playoffs with a bunch of star defensemen. So I just think in the long run, who's going to make a deeper playoff run? It's probably going to be the Hurricanes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That top six defensively, all three pairings defensively from Carolina, just really strong. They lost Dougie Hamilton, replaced him with Tony DeAngelo, haven't skipped a beat. That's Shea, DeAngelo. Who else do they have on that team? Ethan Bear, I think. I mean, they're just locked down defensively. I think they give a lot of they'll give any team problems on their speed offensively. They don't have the true bona fide MVP candidates, but their top 9 really, all dangerous. Aho, Svechnikov, and like Jordan Stahl even on the third line, Trocheck. That's crazy depth. So I see your point with Carolina. I think I would go Colorado.
Yeah.
But it's definitely close. I think those are the 2 teams to beat. Are there any teams besides those 2 that stand out to you as maybe in that upper tier?
Tampa, always Tampa. Tampa Bay Lightning they're always up there. I mean, you can't really count them out. They've won back-to-back cups. They could definitely win it again. I mean, they're kind of the only team that I could see like starting a dynasty. Dynasties are really rare now, and winning the cup 3 times in a row, that's like one of the hardest trophies to win in sports. So if they won it a 3rd time, that'd be crazy. But I could totally see them getting it done. They have really good defensive depth as well. They have Victor Hedman. They have a really good offensive core. They lost a few guys last year, but they still have like Stamkos, Kucherov, Point.
Stamkos having a great year.
Oh yeah, he's always having a good year. What are you talking about? Yeah.
If he's not hurt.
And they have probably one of the best goaltenders of all time, Andrei Vasilevsky, in my opinion. He's so good. He just has a perfect goalie figure, and he's really good at his game.
Yeah, definitely. Tampa doesn't scare me as much as in years past, I think. They definitely have a great record and they're right on top, but I think they're relying too much on Vasilevsky to be the superstar that he is. And relying on Vasilevsky isn't the worst game plan, but I don't think they're the juggernaut that they were in years past when they won 2 cups. I don't think it's that team. I think it's a great team, but I think they're running into some problems, even in their own division with maybe Florida. Maybe Toronto. I don't see Toronto giving them much issue.
Yeah, we'll talk about them a little later.
Definitely. All right, moving on to a small market corner here. Today we're going to talk about the San Jose Sharks. San Jose Sharks are in a weird spot, I think. They're definitely not good enough to make any real noise in the playoffs, even if they make the playoffs, and they're not bad enough to be tanking. They have too many albatross contracts with Erik Karlsson, Marc-Edouard Vlasic, and I don't know if you would count Brent Burns as an albatross, but I think it's a bit long considering his age. And they have some pending UFAs. Tomas Hertl's having a career year, 25 goals already, and is set to be UFA. What do you think the Sharks should do from this position to maybe grow, or do you think they should start over?
I think they should rebuild. The Sharks have been kind of subpar. The last time they really did good was when they were in the Western Conference Finals against the Blues a few years ago. But if you look at the record, 26, 25, and 7, I mean, that's very subpar for the NHL. They have a good amount of points. Just like I said, the Pacific Division this year is just very weak. The only really good team that I've seen this year from the Pacific Division that's been consistent is the Calgary Flames. The rest of the teams have been kind of, all right. But it's kind of weird to see San Jose in this position because San Jose is sort of like the Nashville Predators. They've kind of been dominant in like kind of the mid 2010s, and now they're kind of starting to rebuild.
Mhm.
But yeah, they've definitely had a disappointing season. Tomas Hertl has been pretty good for them this season still. He's always pretty consistent. He has 25 goals, 21 assists, and he's played most of the games so far this season. So yeah, I would probably put him on the trade block next season.
Mhm.
That's who I would say. Because I don't know, I don't really see them getting better in the next few years to actually contend. So
Mhm.
I think they should do like a small rebuild.
I think you make a good point, right? They're nowhere near good enough.
Hmm.
I wonder if they actually if they have the ability to go full on rebuild
Hmm.
because they have these terrible contracts like Eric Carlson, who I don't think they can move.
No.
I maybe they should try and compete for the next however many years because there's no point really. They lost Pavelski recently. Talk about
Mhm.
him a little later.
Oh yeah.
They lost Pavelski. They lost Joe Thornton.
Hmm.
They just aren't the same team. But
And then they had Evander Kane, and
Kane
obviously
lost.
he had that gambling problem, and then played in the NHL a little bit. And now he's with the Oilers, so kind
Mhm.
of yeah.
Yeah, Kane's gone. They're a little directionless, and I think the management knows that, and I think they're now a little hesitant to sign long contracts. So I could see Hurdle being traded at the deadline.
Mhm.
But as for a full-on rebuild, maybe wait a few years, maybe look around. I don't know if they have the market share for their fans to commit to a rebuild.
Mhm.
I think their appeal comes from being a good team. So I do think they're going to be hesitant to, wait to not wait and maybe try and win a little bit. But I don't see a path to them being anything more. They don't really have. Do they have any good prospects? Um, I mean, there's some defense. Dahlin's pretty good, but I don't see anyone superstar level.
Yeah, their prospects aren't like super promising. I mean, some of
Mhm.
them look pretty good, but yeah, like you said, none of them are like really superstar caliber.
Mhm.
Another option they could do with Hurdle, in my opinion, is if they're not gonna try to trade him, I think if they do extend him, they need to extend him for like basically his whole for like the rest of his career. Because I feel like
Right.
if they want to do a small rebuild, they should probably turn Tomas Hurdle into a franchise player. Because don't get me wrong, he's a good player, but not
Mhm.
your average NHL like watcher knows really who Tomas Hurdle is. So I feel like they could mold him into that franchise player, and then he could turn into like the Sharks guy. Like when people think of San Jose, they will be like, "Oh yeah, Tomas Hurdle." So
That'd be something, wouldn't it?
yeah, I feel like they could do that. So like lock them up for like 6, 7, 8 years.
Mhm. So another
Yeah.
big news coming out today are the Heritage Classic outdoor games. We have a big one wrapping up just now. That would
Hmm.
be the Leafs and the Sabres. It seems the Sabres are pretty cruising now to a victory, 5-2 over Toronto. And honestly, Harrison, Toronto has been pretty lackluster recently. I know Jack Campbell's been out with the rib injury, but they just don't look like they have anything without that goalie.
Yeah, they look really weird. It's kind of weird to see the Sabres win against the Leafs because the Leafs have been pretty consistent this year. But it's good to
Mhm.
see Buffalo is kind of trending upwards right now. They've been kind they've been kind of hot streaky.
Mhm. Yeah, they have. I think maybe playing Jack Eichel has gotten a little bit of juice back in them. Peyton Krebs, they got in that Jack Eichel deal. Awesome player. Been playing really well recently. Same with Alex Tuck, Tage Thompson at center. That's a pretty revolutionary find. And now they're showing it in a Heritage Classic game, winning pretty convincingly over a Toronto Maple Leafs team that fancied themselves to be Cup contenders at the early part of the year and looked
Mhm.
like it for a while. I'm I'm impressed with Buffalo recently. They don't look like the dumpster fire that they have previous years. They look a little more confident now that they have a direction. And, Toronto, I don't think they're built properly. They're very top heavy, and I
Mhm.
don't think it's going to be enough to make the playoff run they feel like they need to.
Yeah. Um, so for those of you who don't know, the Heritage Classic is played every year. It's usually a game played between two Canadian teams. I think the Sabres are in it this year because Buffalo's like right on the border. So there's a lot of
Yeah,
Canadian Sabres fans.
basically
But
Canadian.
it's kind of like the Winter Classic where they come out with like classic jerseys. So Buffalo and Toronto are both wearing special jerseys for today. Um, but yeah, it's really good to see Buffalo trending up. But yeah, like you said, Toronto has had some goaltending troubles. A lot of their goalies have been getting hurt, um, and
Mhm.
they've been talking to the coach about like maybe signing a new goalie or anything, but they're sticking with their guys. So, and even when their goalies aren't hurt, they haven't been performing the best. So, um, yeah, Toronto's always been like a playoff team. They have enough
Mhm.
consistent scorers like Marner and Austin Matthews, obviously, and like John Tavares for them to make the playoffs. But I don't know. I feel like every year they always don't make enough moves to move it past the first round. They always get upset in the first round, or they always make it to a game seven. They're known for choking in the first round, so I can kind of see that again this year. Maybe they'll make it to the second round, but
Yeah.
I don't really see them pulling a long term like
Mhm.
playoff run. Buffalo is
Yeah.
trending upwards. I feel like they have a really
Mhm.
bright future. Obviously, since they've been not great in the past few years, that they've gotten a lot of good draft picks and they've been really playing well. Jeff Skinner's has been playing a little bit better. Victor Olofsson has been playing really well. So it's good to see those guys are finally producing. It seems like they're finally clicking because they seem a little bit
Mhm.
better than last year. And I feel like they're actually like starting to rebuild now and like starting to contend in the NHL because last year for a while like they couldn't win a game and everyone was like, how are these guys an NHL team? So it's good to see them competing with teams like when they had that big win against Vegas the other night, and they're about to win. They're about to beat probably one of the best Canadian teams in the league right now, and I mean
Mhm.
the Leafs are still a top 10 team in the league, so it's good to see them winning big against big teams. It's it's
Mhm.
it's showing that their future is bright.
Yeah, and I know Sabres fans feel pretty good with the new leadership with Alex Tuck and
Mm,
Peyton Krebs. They feel like they're headed in the right direction. I know they're kind of happy Jack Eichel is maybe on the outs. They didn't
mm-hmm.
feel like he was the real leader he needed them to be. And
Yeah.
10 minute, Toronto, you're right. They have too much talent to miss the playoffs. Austin
Mm-hmm.
Matthews just hit 45 goals this evening.
Yeah.
Pretty good campaign from him. I don't think that uh, they they feel like they can't build around him. They're definitely going to, but they
Mm-hmm.
also hamstrung themselves pretty strong with their cap situation. And I think they thought Jack Campbell was the answer, and maybe he can be. He's been shown to be really good, but if he can't stay healthy, they can't rely on him. And now he's got the rib injury, and they do not perform with even a, an average goaltender, right?
Yeah.
Who was it? Mrazek was their goalie. Did not play well.
I think so.
Um, yeah, and their defense. Morgan Riley's a good player, definitely. And
Mm-hmm.
who else do they have? Do they still have Martinez? I think they're just Muzzin too. It's good, but it's not. They don't have the depth and the all around because they have so much spent on their top four good forwards that I don't think they have a well-rounded enough team to even. They might end up a first-round exit again this year. They look like they're going to play
Yeah.
Tampa in the first round, or as it looks right now. I don't know how they can
Gosh.
beat Tampa,
No,
Or
I don't think.
Florida. I don't see a path to them winning,
Yeah.
but we'll
Um,
see.
Yeah, honestly,
Anything you want to add?
you hit it right. You hit the nail right on the head there. Toronto just has always been known for not adjusting. They're not an adjustable team. I don't know why. Like they haven't realized that in the past few years, but I don't know. They always have a really good like starting lineup and like really good players, but they never adjust the depth. And I feel like that always screws them over in the long run in the playoffs. And then
Mhm.
Buffalo, I'm really excited to see who they build around because I don't really know yet like who will be their franchise player because obviously they had Eichel for so long, and with him, Buffalo's gone over rebuild after rebuild after rebuild. So their last rebuild, they were trying to
Mhm.
go with Jack Eichel, and then Eichel wanted out, and they had some disagreements, and obviously he left. So now they're kind of going through this new rebuild, and hopefully they can stay consistent. So I'm curious to see who they build around.
Yeah, hopefully Owen Power's the defenseman we all think he is. Down in
Mhm.
Michigan, first overall pick last year. Maybe it's Peyton Krebs? I know he's had some injury issues in the past, but he's a talented player, and
Mhm.
I don't know if he's the number one player, but he can be a top line player, I think.
Yeah.
So really quickly, last thing, Joe Pavelski signing his
Mhm.
contract extension, another year, I think, just one more year in Dallas. Joe
Mhm.
Pavelski seems to have found a home outside of San Jose. So what do you
Yeah.
think about Joe Pavelski signing another year with Dallas?
I think it's great. I think the Stars made a really
Mhm.
good move. Joe Pavelski has always been a really consistent player, and like you said, I feel like I think he's kind of an underrated like fit with the team. Like people haven't realized that Joe
Mhm.
Pavelski is like, very well with the Stars. I also think he's
Yeah.
very good at tipping the puck. He's a big like
Mhm.
front of the net presence. He's a very good locker room leader. There's a lot of things I could say about him. He was
Mhm.
he was great in San Jose, obviously, and then he left. But yeah, they extended him 1 year, $5.5 million, which I think that's a pretty good deal for someone like him because he is getting old. But um, his stats with Dallas, he's played with them for I think 3 seasons now, and he's scored 62 goals, 80 assists, which that tallies up to 142 points. So that's pretty good. I
Really good.
mean, for 3 years, that's about 20-ish goals a year. So, and that's pretty consistent for an older player in the NHL. So, I think it's good for them to extend him for 1 year. Have that leadership still for next year because Dallas is a hot team right now. So who knows what they'll do if they'll make it to the playoffs or not. They're kind of pushing for that wild card spot. So they might make the playoffs. They might make a
Mhm.
run. Who knows? I feel like it's good to keep them one more year to see what they do next year. And if all works out,
Yeah, I mean, you made a great point. Joe Pavelski is the perfect kind of guy you want in a locker room with a young team. They have up and coming stars like Rupe Hintz, like Jason Robertson. I mean, those two guys look really, really good. And those two, I mean, that's two you can build around. If Tyler Seguin can find his form again, he's another player that you can build around.
yeah.
He's still pretty young. And if Jamie
Mhm.
Benn and Pavelski can stay productive for another year and they add another piece, that could be a cup contender, I think. That top six there, that's as strong as
They were
almost
in the
any
cup
other
final
team.
2 years ago.
Yeah, they made it in 2020, the bubble year. Yeah. I don't that might have been a little fluky. They're just a hot goaltending run, but I don't think they're that far off anymore, especially with the young core they have. I think, you know, they have something there and keeping the leadership together, especially Pavelski, who's a great locker room guy as we know. It's really worth the 5.5 million that they're paying him for one more year. I think it's a low risk deal with a pretty high upside, and even not on the ice, like off the ice we know, but on the ice He's, I think, the best player we've ever seen at tipping the puck near the net. He
Oh
is
yeah,
so good at that net front presence.
yeah.
I mean, perfect for power play. Even like those goals around the net that no one really likes talking about, no one likes highlighting,
Mhm.
but they're goals.
Yeah,
Goals are goals, and he's a great goal
yeah.
scorer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
Mhm.
he's just a very consistent guy. Like you said, I think the Stars have a very underrated roster, and he just adds to that. I think he's kind of filled into a role that Tyler Sagan kind of hasn't lived up to a little bit. So I think that's kind of why they
Yeah.
extended him too, because Tyler Sagan is kind of regressing a lot. So and Joe Pavelski is still kind of consistent. So they want to keep that superstar just in case like Tyler Sagan kind of is still regressing out of his superstardom.
Yeah, he just hasn't been the same. But I think that's going to wrap it up for us here at the Hockey Show. We're going to send it back to Matt. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it for the update there. So just want to give you guys a quick little update on that game there of the Tim Hortons Heritage Classic between the Buffalo Sabres and the Leafs. Basically at the end, the Sabres won 5-2. Austin Matthews did cap his 45th goal of the season, but Peyton Krebs and Vinny Hinostroza for the Sabres both scored 2 goals. Tage Thompson also scored another goal, who is Buffalo's leading goal scorer and point getter this season. Buffalo has now won 4 of their last 6 games. Now we're going to want to get into baseball here. And Shane and myself are here to talk to you about how the MLB is officially back. Like I said earlier in the headlines, the new deal between the players and the ownerships and organizations have struck, and we will see baseball in the coming weeks here. So let's head on over to baseball now. All righty, everybody. We got baseball now with my buddy here, Shane. Shane, how you feeling, buddy?
A lot better that I get to talk about sport that's actually going on. So definitely nice to not have to come back out here 2 weeks in a row and just say that, hey, might have baseball soon. We might not. Luckily, though, after 99 days, almost 100 full days, we do have baseball officially back. Spring training officially started today. Players were able to report sooner, but now we get the official start of it and finally can actually talk about the sport itself going on and not just when it's going to be coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe we have, just there's been so many rule changes, input for this year, and we have some to share with you right now. But what do you think of these new changes? Like, do you think it's really put in for the players, for the game itself? How are the fans going to react to this? What are your opinions on that?
I think it's interesting because the one role that I was most expecting to see, and it just made a lot of sense, and we talked about it briefly last week with Evan on, is the fact that now the National League has a DH as well officially, and it's going to be full time. So that's 15 new full time essentially positions for players, which is really big for them. Something the league was kind of obviously pushing back on for a long time, but they finally said, hey, more offense, more players, we're good with that. The ban on shifts too, interesting. Because in some ways it might help the players, other ways might not, especially if you're a pitcher, probably not super happy about it, just because it makes defense a little bit harder behind you. But I think something that needed to be done just to kind of help get the game moving forward a little bit just was causing a lot of players to kind of be very like one way, not be able to do much with it. So
Yeah, and it's kind of going to be interesting going forward to see how these players do react. They are getting their spring training session.
yes, yeah.
Maybe not as long. I don't know off the top of my head if it's the same amount of time as normal spring training dates for the previous seasons. But that being said, you got to think about these players walking in to the organization again, getting ready to go through a full 162 game season.
Yep.
You don't want to see injuries, but at the same time, I don't know where they've been at, preparing for the season. It seemed like for a moment this could go on for months.
Yeah, sure.
It finally that it happened though. It is going to be, a little in the back of everybody's heads. Like, how are these players going to be able to keep up with their bodies? Obviously, we will see them go through a little bit of spring training, like I said here. But I feel like it's going to lead to more injuries if they don't get their full time in practice, and getting their bodies prepared for such a long, grueling season.
I think it's definitely possible. It's going to come down to, because they couldn't be a part of the team's facilities, how much were they able to do on their own, and then how many players actually did actively prepare as if the season was going to start relatively on time, right? Because we're going to miss a little bit of time as far as when it would have started, but we're still going to have the full schedule. So we're not going to be missing any actual games, just a later start. With that being the case, if players weren't prepared for that, or if they weren't preparing for that, these slightly, smaller spring training schedule could impact especially older players that maybe need more time to get ready, opposed to some younger guys too as well.
Yep, you said it right and clear there. I believe it's really going to be a hit or miss depending on these organizations and how they handle their players, and just making sure they can get back into the groove of things. But going forward now, we do have officially the season coming up. Out of the bat, I mean, this is kind of off topic here, but like, what are your thoughts? Who are your top teams going into the season?
It's interesting because there's still a lot of big free agents on the market, right? So there's a couple guys like Carlos Correa, especially Freddie Freeman. We saw Kershaw and Rodon for most people as their top two pitchers on the market. They're still, they got signed this week as well, finally, now that they were able to. Kershaw going back to the Dodgers and Rodon signing with the Giants, the two teams there in the same division, kind of in an arms race right now. But I mean, really, as far as top teams, Dodgers still come to mind. I mean, they've had trouble finishing off seasons, but they're always there at the end. I think if the Braves get Freeman back, they could go on another run for a World Series. That team is really stacked still. I'll tell you, one team that isn't going to be doing anything is my team, the Pirates. I'm not expecting anything out of them. As soon as I saw that the season came back, all I saw was like, man, they were a week away from being mathematically eliminated if they missed any games. So.
Well, that's the beauty of the sport,
Yeah.
like sometimes you'll be surprised of what your team does. And, it's just such a long season too, to the point where literally you can't afford to be on such a losing streak. That's number one. But if you can hang around, win a couple games back and forth for a couple months, at least maybe get a couple series under your belt, you're still in it. And going back to what we were talking about with possibly players getting injuries down the road here, I think that's going to be the factor in deciding, when it comes to playoffs, where the seating will be, what players will be available too. And obviously, like free agency, that's going to be huge coming up in the next 2 weeks here, especially with the season up on the rise. We're only less than a month away from it starting. So, that being said, I kind of wanted to ask you an opinion here. I'm a Yankees guy.
Okay. All right.
So I kind of want to get somebody's intake that's not a Yankees fan on what moves do you think they would have to make going forward, or what would they have to do in order to get back into the contending conversation?
I think that getting one of the big free agents left, specifically Correa, is the one that's marked to them a lot. Like that, getting that player in there and having a lockdown shortstop again, where you don't have to worry about that position, because ever since obviously Jeter has not been there, that spot has been kind of up for grabs at different times, and they haven't really settled it fully. Getting a guy, even like maybe Trevor Story, right? Somebody who has a good glove. The hitting is kind of hit or miss with him, and he does have the course factor. How much is that going to affect him not playing there? But one of those two guys, if they can get them and solidify the lineup, they just had so many injuries last year that it's kind of hard to say like how good this team actually is when it's healthy. But Stanton was still great last year when he was healthy. Judge is always going to be a guy that's a threat. If you get one more legitimate star in that team with the pitching that they do have with Cole, unfortunately, from my, dealing with them, then I think that they have the best chance to win that division. It's still going to be tough just because that division has a ton of talented teams. The Rays are always there. Red Sox are going to be there. But that would put them into at least me thinking that they're going to be a top 3 team in the AL at least.
Yeah, no, I think, I'm hoping for a couple more moves at least. And, especially for the pride they have and the title that they have of being the New York Yankees. They're always expected greatness.
Exactly.
And if not, they're an easy target. They're an easy target to go after their
last
fans.
couple of years, especially, I've been, it's been tough. Like,
yeah,
you have that target on your back, man.
It's kind of funny because, I'm not the biggest baseball guy, but I follow pretty much every sport. And growing up in Buffalo, obviously, I could have picked, the Blue Jays or the Cleveland Guardians, I believe
Yeah,
now.
Guardians now. Yeah, sure.
And it's just interesting that I ended up picking the Yankees mainly because they're my New York team. I got to root for the New
Right.
York teams, even though
I'm
there are
stuck
the
with the
Mets.
Pirates, so I understand. Like, that's just kind of what it is. So.
Yeah, everybody's got their different take on it, but no. That being said, what I was getting to is they're so easy. Yankee fans are so easy to get in their heads, especially because we haven't been producing, this decade.
Yeah,
Very
really,
much.
unfortunately.
I
Yeah.
mean, all we have to say is we've got 20-something championships, and usually it gets everybody else upset. But it's really starting not to be relevant now that our last World Series was in 2009. But I kind of want to get your opinion going forward here on the postseason rules.
Yes.
Obviously, we have a change, and there will be 12 teams in the postseason now. But also, there's not going to be the man on second base if it goes to extra innings. And I think that's a great thing because
Me
the
too.
whole second man on second base, it really does not help the best team win the game in extra innings, in my opinion.
And that's the reason, especially for the postseason. Like, if they had decided, that's something that we want to keep for certain situations, that's fine, especially just pace of play, trying to make games not last as long, especially the extra inning games. But in the postseason, I feel like you have to just play baseball, right? Like, it doesn't matter what circumstances are. The best team is the team that should win in that situation. And giving somebody a base runner to start off doesn't give that any more of a reason to be the case where the best team wins. I think just letting them play. It's the postseason. If people are watching it, they're going to watch it. You don't have to worry about people being like, I'm not watching a 4-hour game. If your team's in it, it's postseason, you're watching it. Like, not that I would know much about that, but I know that I would if it happens. So.
Well, yeah, it's. I think so many teams or so many leagues out there nowadays have changed regular season, overtime, extra innings, but they have not tampered with the playoffs because they want to try and keep it to the original standard as much as possible. And I think that's great for each individual sport, and especially for such a long season in baseball. I understand why they would put that in for the regular season because they have to get on with their days.
Exactly.
Sometimes people have double headers. They need to be like, hey,
especially this year, we're going to have some. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's going to be packed. Absolutely packed. But yeah, transitioning over into the postseason, I mean, they're all, spaced out accordingly to the postseason schedule. And I think you really want to get the best of the best when it comes to that time. So that being said, I think that's important. The one, though, that really does kind of strike me is the lottery system. And everybody's got different opinions on it because, like, also talking about other leagues and stuff, most fans hate the lottery system.
Yes.
And if you look at the way the NFL has done it over the past, ever since they were created, they've never had a lottery system. But you look at NHL now, most people are getting upset because a team that misses the playoffs by one spot, they have a chance of getting the number one pick. That's not saying that's how the MLB is doing their draft lottery, but it's just anytime you have a draft lottery and you're saying it's to stop tanking, I think it's a joke because there are some serious teams out there that cannot keep up with the middle pack. They just seriously need the most help they can get. And by doing that, you need to get the young talent and you need to develop them over the course of years after you draft them. So going forward, I don't know if this is necessarily a good move for them.
I don't think so either. And the biggest thing for me is with a draft lottery, right? The biggest thing that does for, especially for leagues like NBA, for example, they only have 15 spots in a roster. Getting that prize number one player is so much more important on teams that don't have as many players out there at a time, because that does induce tanking. That gives you a reason to say, okay, let's just be bad, give ourselves the best chance to get the best player. With baseball, tanking already shouldn't really be a thing that we have to worry that much about because there's no guarantee anybody you draft is going to make it to the major leagues, especially anytime soon. I mean, some of these guys obviously have been coming up faster, 20-year-old phenom, stuff like that. But I mean, for example, the Pirates just drafted Henry Davis last year, the first over pick. There is no guarantee technically that he's going to see the field in 4 years, even 5 years. And if he does, he might never be more than an average player. Obviously, we're hoping that's not the case, but I don't think it's necessary to fight tanking. If you want to fight tanking, you need to do it differently and not just based on how many what players you can get, monetary fines, things like that. That's how you get to people. That's how you get to these teams and make them actually try to compete.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting how this type of league too, the MLB, you look at how most players in other leagues, if they are drafted low or high by lower teams and don't want to continue with them and move on, obviously they'll move. But you look at the MLB where they don't have a cap limit, and they, depending on your franchise and owner and how much money they want to spend, that really, I mean, really, at the end of the day, it depends on what that draftee wants to do for that organization. They can stick around if they want to. And if they're looking for a certain number, obviously the negotiations will take place. Some owners, though, just do not like spending money.
I know that a little
which-
firsthand, unfortunately.
So really what I wanted to get at there is, do we have to not look into a draft lottery here, but do we need to look and find a way to possibly incorporate and I can't even speak today.
Incorporate, yeah.
Yes. Into a cap or some type of money hold on these players going forward, because really it's the only league where if your owners and your organization has the money and wants to spend the money, they go ahead and do it. It all comes down to tax at the end of the day. But some of these clubs are making millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
To the point it doesn't even matter. So other struggling franchises aren't able to compete with them. I think that's really the problem.
And I think in general, you're right. I think one of the first things that they could do and should do, and it's something I was hoping could have been a possibility with these negotiations, was not necessarily salary cap ceiling, but a floor, because that allows you to make sure that teams at least have to put a certain amount of money into their team every year, right? Opposed to being able to say, we're just not going to spend any money at all. Because obviously there's issues with teams spending too much money, but a team like, Pirates here, just talking from experience, they don't want to spend any money at all, ever. And as soon as a player might command any money, they're out the door. And there's been certain situations where, like, McCutchen was here for a while and got a decent amount of money, but then he kind of fell off. But for the most part, we're not willing to pay any players that actually have a reason to be paid with the top players in MLB. And that would help at least get that off the floor, where you don't have as many teams tanking, for example. That's one of the ways to help that. And then as you go along, you try to figure out, okay, what is a good actual ceiling where teams can still be big spenders. They can still spend a bunch of money if they really want to, but at least have a ceiling on it where you say you can't just go ahead and make all these crazy trades and moves for high priced players to go for a run every year.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. But going forward, and we only got about 4 minutes left here for the baseball section here. You got anything else that we should be talking about heading into this new season?
Really, I think that we were going to talk about a little bit of the postseason. I am very interested to see how that changed to 12 teams, how that impacts the way that teams approach the trade deadline. Because now more than ever, you're going to have a chance where if you're on the fringe, you really have a reason to go for it. Because if you can get into the top 12, especially with the way baseball is, and we just saw the Braves last year run the table, as a lower seeded team, like, you can win the World Series in baseball without having the most stacked team or without having the best regular season, as long as you can get in the dance. So to me, how that impacts trading in general, and especially how aggressive some teams are at the deadline, if they're right on that 14, 15, 16 range, that is going to be something that's really interesting to see moving forward, how much more the trade deadline means. Because we've had some duds in the last couple of years.
I agree.
Yeah, guys we thought would be moved weren't, and just stuff like that, just not a lot of movement. I do think that could very well change this coming year moving forward.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you for all your insight on this topic here of baseball this evening and on the block here. But we're going to wrap it up, the baseball section, and head on because we have some big news coming up.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. We got some breaking news right now. Apparently, Bucs quarterback Tom Brady has unretired. Yes, it's true. He just announced that he is coming back for the 2022 season for his 23rd season. And he said he has unfinished business in Tampa and plans to come back and play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. this is a wild topic hitting us right now, because now we have to take in consideration, what does this mean for the Bucks? What does this mean for free agents like Leonard Fournette, Chris Godwin, and even Rob Gronkowski, who was reported possibly going to retire or possibly go to the Buffalo Bills? Now that Brady's back, will he come back as well? We will have all the updates for you going into football right now. Alrighty, everybody. Welcome back, Harrison, to the chat here as we take on football. And breaking news right off the bat, Tom Brady's back. How do you feel?
Dude, that is insane because
just when we thought it was over.
I know. Oh
Like,
gosh. Yeah.
to me, this is probably the craziest thing to happen. And at the same time, it's not really that mind-boggling to me because of the way he went out. I mean, to just say over social media, that he's done, last football, that last, all right, speaking of that football of Brady's last touchdown pass, I think it's just sold for thousands of dollars, if I'm correct.
$112K, I think.
Yeah. I don't think anybody wants that anymore.
Yeah, $518K.
$518,000 that last ball that Brady threw in the playoffs went for. What a disgrace. Oh my goodness. But getting back into it, I mean, Brady's back for another season. And I got to think right off the bat, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, all their, all their free agents like Chris Godwin, their running back, Leonard Fournette, Rob Gronkowski, their tight end, I think they're all going to want to sign back. I mean, you have arguably the best quarterback of all time coming back. It seemed like last season was one of his best years of his career. I feel like he's going to come back, and now right off the bat, I think they're the favorites to come out of the NFC.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, they've already won a Super Bowl with that team. Why not just bring them all back? I mean, I know they fell short this year, but I mean, they lost to the Super Bowl champs. So I could definitely see them making another deep playoff run. So, they need to get on that stat. And
well, it definitely seems like with their division and the way it's lined up, I mean, you have guys like the Falcons, the Saints, and the Panthers that they have to go through each and every year, and they don't have a quarterback. Like,
well, they might get the shots.
Well, that's what I would like to talk about later on. But, as of right now, just on paper, it's an easy win your division scenario for them. So they'll be hosting a playoff game. Now they just have to bring a couple more pieces into Tampa, or even just bring the same team back, because obviously that game they lost to the Rams in the playoffs, it was just a classic, eventful, hard-fought football game going back and forth. I feel like 5 times out of 10, the other team's winning. It's a flip of the coin towards the end there. But that being said, the other reason why I think it's a smart idea for Brady to come back and continue his legacy is because some of the trades that have been made from the NFC to the AFC. That being said, I'm talking about Russell Wilson, the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, being traded to the Denver Broncos.
Oh yeah. This one was not a super shocker to me because the Broncos have been looking for their quarterback ever since Peyton Manning has left. So I feel like they've always been a quarterback away to at least like get a playoff spot. So, and I feel like Russ needed to get out of Seattle because they had a really bad year this year. They're starting to trend downwards. So, and if you want to get Russell Wilson another ring, then why not go to a team like the Broncos, who has a lot of potential to make a playoff run?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think it's a really good trade, honestly, in my opinion, for Seattle. And I think the reason why there is because they got so much in return. You get in a tight end, defensive lineman, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and a 5th round. That's a ton of future for them. And that being said, I personally don't think that the Broncos will be a contender right off the bat. And the reason why I say that is because of how stacked the AFC is. You have to go through teams like the Buffalo Bills, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Baltimore Ravens, who I think are going to have a huge jump back into the winning their division conversation. You have the Bengals, who have a good defense and are only going to get better as Joe Burrow continues on. But I think their division's hard enough already as well. You have Mahomes, you have Justin Herbert, and obviously you have Derek Carr, who isn't the most talented out of that division, but he's still a baller. He's still going to be able to win you games and possibly split. So that being said, I think the Broncos, even though they got one of the most elite quarterbacks in this league, he's a little bit older. I know he's a scrambler. He's still really good. But at the end of the day, they're going to be put in a hard situation. And now with the news of Tom Brady coming back, depending on how free agency goes, everything's going to be going, left and right, up and down. Speaking of right away, Michael Gallup of the Dallas Cowboys just signed a 5-year deal for $62.5 million. So all this is going to be so crazy to cover. But I really do think at the end of the day, I think Seattle won the trade because they're going to be able to develop. They're going to be able to start over if needed to. But even so, I don't think Drew Lock is that bad. I don't think he's great. I don't think he'll be able to get them in deep into the playoffs, but I think they'll be interesting enough to be around the playoff hunt. So I really do think if they get a quarterback in free agency or draft one in the upcoming draft here or years down the road, I think they're going to be fine within the next 2 years.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there. I think it's a bit too much of what the Broncos gave up just to get Russell Wilson. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's one of the top quarterbacks in the league, but I mean, 2 first-round picks, like seriously. They traded a really good tight end in Fant. Like you said, I do kind of disagree with you there because I think Drew Lock has been very inconsistent, but you never know. He could find his steps.
Well, the reason why I say that is because of the type of offensive line he's dealt with back in Denver. I'm not saying he's like, one of the top quarterbacks in the league, but I'm not saying he's like the worst in my opinion. The reason why I say that is just because of what he's dealt with injuries over his career. Also, just having that inconsistency of, okay, who's on your team? Who's on my offense? Who am I dealing with week in and week out? They have to find a solid identity at offense for a quarterback, a young quarterback like Drew Lock to evolve. Now, you have a guy like Russell Wilson coming in there, and he's seen everything. He's been to a Super Bowl, won a Super Bowl, lost a Super Bowl. He's just a veteran guy, and he'll be able to adapt there. I think he'll struggle just because of the AFC being stacked. But going into the other side of it, I think he'll have an opportunity with Seattle. But going forward, though, I want to transition into the other trade that was posted this past week with Carson Wentz getting traded to the Washington Commanders. I think this is a great move for the Colts. And the reason why is because they get Wentz off of their team and off of their cap. I think going forward, any quarterback that I think is picked up by the Colts is going to be better than last year. And I think the team itself will have an opportunity to make a run at the playoffs, possibly their division. I think they should really look into a guy like Mitchell Trubisky. I think that's a huge upgrade at quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. Now, for the Commanders, though, this is a little bit of an oddball because why would you take on Carson Wentz? Yes, he does have games where he is able to look like his old self when he first came into the league, but also you just have to wonder, like, how much longer can he take? You remember about Andrew Luck and how he retired early just because of all the beatings that he got. Carson Wentz is starting to look like that. And maybe they were just looking for an opportunity to spend some cap, get their budget back up a little bit and go forward. But they already have a quarterback in Taylor Heineke. going
Mhm.
forward. It seems like they might be drafting a quarterback in this upcoming draft here. What are your thoughts on the trade?
I like it, and I like it a lot. Because so me being a Titans fan, I kind of liked Wentz being on the Colts because I feel like he kind of held them back. So it was nice to see. But I agree with you there. I think the Colts will definitely pursue a quarterback who will fit them better because the past few seasons they've kind of struggled with finding a quarterback. They had Jacoby Brissett after Luck left, and that kind of went like the season went wrong for them. And then they signed Phillip Rivers, and he got them to the playoffs, but he wasn't like great because he retired the season after. And then they had Wentz this season, which I really feel like that the Colts could have been a really good playoff team if they didn't have Wentz. I mean, they had
Well, yeah,
most
I
Pro
mean,
Bowlers.
do you remember just watching how much they relied on Jonathan Taylor?
Yes.
And occasionally, I think there was a game where they won. I think Carson Wentz threw maybe 15 passes total. Like, that's ridiculous in today's league.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, like I said, they had the most Pro Bowlers. They've always had a great defense. They have Jonathan Taylor, who's become a star. So I think it's a really good trade for them. But yeah, like you said, there were games where like they would barely win. Or I remember, here's one game, for example. We were tied. The Titans and the Colts were tied, and then Carson Wentz threw a pick right on the goal line, like a pick six.
I remember that.
Yeah. So just stuff like that. I feel like he gets them into bad situations. So I think it's good, really good for the Colts. I mean, I could see him maybe starting for the Commanders, but like you said, I feel like there's going to be a bunch of quarterbacks in rotation for the Commanders.
Well, I
Heineke,
mean, as of right now, they only have Taylor Heineke off of my knowledge.
They'll
I
probably
don't
draft
know.
one, like you said.
Yeah, because I know their backup or their starter last year was Ryan Fitzpatrick, and obviously he's moved on out of his contract. That being said, I mean, what's the realistic shot here of Wentz being the starting quarterback? I mean, I don't know why, unless you're just doing it to gain cap. I don't know what their cap situation was like necessarily, but going forward, what upgrade do you have by putting Carson Wentz at the backfield?
I mean, honestly, I don't see one because, like you said, there's a lot of games where he plays really bad, and then there's one or two games every now and then where he'll play like his old self. I just don't really see him getting any better. I think he's shown us what he's capable of, and with a team like the Commanders, I wouldn't really try to do that. I think he could beat out Taylor Heineke, but we'll see. I mean, if they draft a rookie quarterback, who knows? It's kind of up in the air for the Commanders.
Well, I know as you and I are both AFC fans, you like the Titans. I'm a Bills fan. It kind of pains us because, especially you, because you look at Indianapolis basically getting off the hook with cap issue if they do have some over the next couple months here, because they're just getting rid of all that money in that contract in Carson Wentz going forward. But also too, I mean, they are now looking for a new identity at the quarterback position. I know I mentioned Mitchell Trubisky going forward, but as a Titans fan and then in that division, the Colts are really the only ones that are going to give you guys a, run for your money and stuff like that. So going forward, if they do sign a guy like Mitch Trubisky, what are your thoughts on this Colts team going forward? I mean, do you think they have a chance of taking you guys over?
For sure. Because this year with Carson Wentz and last year with Phillip Rivers, the Colts were they're always trying to give us trouble. And I feel like there's always a point in the season where there's a deciding point, and we always get by the skin of our teeth. So I feel like once they get that quarterback, they could definitely take the Titans for the division. I think Mitch Trubisky would be a really good fit. A lot of people criticize Trubisky as career with the Bears, but I feel like he was obviously in the wrong system. And now he's obviously the backup for the Bills. And I feel like he's trying to find like that starting position. I also heard they are looking at Marcus Mariota as well, which that would just be crazy because, Mariota was the Titans starter for years. So that would be really weird to see him on the other side, like playing football for a division rival. So I don't think a lot of Titans fans like that either. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's one of those trades that everybody, their eyes kind of pops, not in the sense where they're, afraid of a team getting better, but just kind of a weird one to see what would happen. But kind of before we get into the next trade I wanted to talk about, I just got a report that Kirk Cousins re-signed for a 1-year deal, $35 million. So I kind of want to tie that into the whole Deshaun Watson deal. Obviously, the NFL came out and said that basically they're done with the investigation going forward of Deshaun Watson and the sexual assault case. But that being said, one of the teams that were reported of him going to was going to be the Minnesota Vikings, but now Kirk Cousins back for another year. And basically, I kind of want to get into where is Deshaun Watson going? They already said that the Texans don't plan to trade him to an AFC team. Thank the Lord. I like that a lot. But at the same time, it's a smart thing for them because they don't want to see him coming back into his building anytime soon. But with the remaining NFC teams, some people were thinking Tampa as well, but with Brady coming back, obviously that's taken out of the picture. I would like to see him possibly go to the New Orleans Saints. That's a team that has shown multiple interest along with the Carolina Panthers. I think if he goes to the New Orleans Saints, they are a team that will be able to put up with the Bucs just because of his athletic ability and stuff. We will see going forward if there will be a suspension, though, for Watson. So it kind of just comes down to what team wants to take a chance on that. And I think New Orleans is in the perfect scenario to be that type of team and take a chance on Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, for me, I would like to see him go to Carolina. I feel like Carolina has always been talked about with Deshaun Watson. Like if he gets the cases dropped, like Carolina would be very interested. Like I remember when the case were being talked about if Deshaun Watson would ever return. I remember like Carolina and Miami were always in talks, and obviously Miami has kind of dropped out of that race. So I feel like he would fit in with like Carolina's culture. I feel like their team kind of reminds me of like that Texans vibe. So I don't know. And he would obviously still be in that same division as the Saints. So it would be interesting to see him. He's being the top two teams are in the same division. And then also he'd be playing Tom Brady every year with the Bucs. So it would be interesting. Yeah.
I think either one of those teams would make a lot of sense for him. Obviously, it's not really his. I think he does have a no trade clause or something like that, or he has to approve of it. I think that's correct. So obviously it's going to have to be a team that he would like to go to. And like you said, I think culture is huge when these players have no trade clauses and they're really looking for a suitor. So I think Carolina and New Orleans, they both bring that type of character. I think they are both teams on the rise, even though they took a little bit of a dip over the past couple of years. I mean, obviously there's been reports of McCaffrey leaving or getting traded. And you look at the whole scenario with the New Orleans Saints, obviously going through quarterback after quarterback after quarterback. I know that story came out about Alvin Kamara after the NFL Pro Bowl, getting in some trouble there. But I think if Deshaun Watson was to come in, the cameras and the media are going to be all over them. But I think that type of organization and the people they have in both of them would be able to handle the situation very professionally. So that being said, though, I would like to go into our next trade here, which we have Khalil Mack getting traded from the Bears to the Chargers. And I think this is a pretty big trade, and only for a 6th-round pick, a talent like Khalil Mack being, I believe he was the 5th overall pick in the 2013 or 14 draft. I'm not 100% sure. But that being said, only for a 6th-round pick, I think he'll have an opportunity to, rebirth himself in a succeeding franchise where the Bears have been going through so much. So what are your thoughts on this one?
I really like the trade. I think it's good.
Oh,
for
and it was a second round pick as well.
Okay. I think it's good for both sides, honestly. Yeah, the Bears get $30 million off their cap hit, and I feel like the Bears are kind of going full rebuild now, since they hired a new coaching staff. They're in need of a new quarterback. So yeah, why waste your defensive star like in a team that's probably not going to contend for like the next 5 years? So I send him to the Chargers, who are on the rise. I mean, you have Justin Herbert, who is great quarterback. They were just this close to get to the playoffs last year, and I feel like they're very close to contending. They have a great defense already. They have Joey Bosa, so I think he'll fit in well with the Chargers. And obviously, a lot of people are complaining about what they got in return, which were the picks. But obviously, if you think about it, I think they were just trying to get rid of him for cap space. So I honestly think that both sides are content with this trade.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to bring up though is it's only a second and a sixth round pick. So I'm trying to think of all the other teams. Obviously, the cap as well. That's huge. I'm trying to think of the other teams though that were probably in contention for this trade, or who even called on to see if Khalil Mack was available. Like you were saying, I know he was pretty much injured last season, and also too, just the Bears going through kind of a rebuild, even though they just drafted a guy like Justin Fields. It seems like they need to start a new identity, and I think going forward, which any NFL team should do if they have a young quarterback or about to draft a young quarterback, it's establish your offensive line. That is really how you build your team. You build it on the line of scrimmage. Start off with the offense, make your way to the defense. They already knew that they had a big piece at the defensive line, and they were like, let's move them out, free up some cap space. Maybe we can start building out our O-line and get Justin Fields some protection. But as you were talking about with the Chargers there, this is a huge pickup for them. I think already having Joey Bosa there, they are about to explode. And I know they're still in a really hard division with Mahomes, now with Russell Wilson, Derek Carr as well. It's so much talent. I think that's probably the hardest division in the league.
I'd say so.
I would just say go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say so. I actually kind of see them as a dark horse to, I wouldn't say win the division. I mean, maybe, but I really see them as dark horse, like second place AFC West team.
Well, I mean, just that Herbert and that offense with Eckler, Keenan Allen, obviously they're going to put up points. There are some games though, especially from last year, that they should have won outright. Regardless of how their defense was and stuff. One I'm thinking of was against the Texans. I think it was week 16 or so. They needed that win to stay in the contention, and obviously didn't have to come down to that week 17 matchup against the Raiders to determine who would go. But I think adding so much at their defensive line, it's going to be hard for teams to run the ball against this new Chargers defense. It's going to be hard for the quarterback to get the ball out fast enough. And, it's really going to come down to them relying on their safeties, their cornerbacks to finish the job on defense because they have such pressure at that D line. So I think it's a really good pickup and a necessary pickup because they do need to be able to keep up with a Kansas City, now with Denver and the Raiders as well. So I think it's a really important trade to look at, and I think it's a good one for both sides, really. I don't think they're necessarily one team won the trade. I think it's going to work out for both at the end of the day here. And kind of just moving on here, I mean, there's some notable free agents out there and some cuts that have been made. And the couple that I want to talk about are Bobby Wagner, obviously of the Seahawks, and Tyreek Cohen, running back from the Bears as well. And you got some guys like Kyle Van Noy from the Patriots getting cut. I think that was necessary. He's just a little bit older. But going to Bobby Wagner, I mean, this guy's a stud. Any team that picks him up will upgrade automatically. I want him so bad for the Bills because I think he would look great with a Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds at that defense, and a defense that already finished number 1 at the end of the regular season. I think adding him, especially a guy who has won a Super Bowl, would be great for a team like the Buffalo Bills. But even though he's up there in age, he still has it. He's the definition of your defensive football guy who is just a nitty-gritty worker, and it basically lives and breathes football 24 hours a day.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also agree with you. I think he'd fit really well with the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are already really good team. I really see them in the Super Bowl in the next few years. So adding Bobby Wagner to the Bills would be insane. And like you said, yeah, I feel like anywhere he goes, the defense is just going to get a lot better. But it's also it's like I said a few minutes ago with Seattle. It seems like they're going through a full rebuild here. I mean, they're trading Wilson, they cut Bobby Wagner. It's all the old players that were on that Super Bowl squad are leaving now. So that was kind of the last of them. So
yeah, and the one thing I'm a little concerned about, kind of going back to what we were already talking about, is like the whole Deshaun Watson thing, because what if he does get traded to Seattle? Like it kind of just shows maybe that's why they're not going to trade DK Metcalf yet. But it's like, why would you release Bobby Wagner? Maybe it's for cap issues, or just maybe Wagner wanted to move on and go to a contending team right away. But in all seriousness, I just think this guy is so talented, and he's just so physical compared to all these other linebackers that are in the league now. And especially in a league where so many positions are changing, where you don't have to be as physical, you just have to be fast. I mean, you think about all these defensive backs, these linebackers, edge rushers. It's really not the physicality. I mean, it is, don't get me wrong. It's not the physicality that is the determining factor, though, that makes him a good player. Obviously, like you look at a guy like Aaron Donald, where he's huge, and yes, he is physical, but he's quick. And the fact that he's quick is just what it's making him a dynamic player in today's league. So going forward, though, I think Bobby Wagner is just such a special talent, where even if he is slowing down a little bit, it's just the hits that he will put on to an opposing team's offense that will just tire them out and make them fatigue throughout the entire game. I think it's a great pickup going forward. But any team will be lucky to grab him. But any other free agents you're thinking about that are available at the moment that you think a team should pick up?
I thought Tariq Cohen was interesting because I feel like that's kind of like Seattle. Like the Bears are getting rid of all of their like guys, and they're keeping Justin Fields, of course, because this will be his second year, so I think they'll probably just build around him. But like they're getting rid of all their older guys, so I think it would be interesting to see who picks up Tariq Cohen. For me, the most interesting one was Roger Saffold, because obviously I'm a Titans fan, so I kind of kept up to date with that one. I think it was honestly a good move for the Titans in the long run, because Roger Saffold had a really good year, and he's a great offensive lineman. I mean, he made the Pro Bowl, but something I always noticed during Titans game this year is he cannot not stay injured. He is always goes down during the game, and I feel like the amount we were paying him and he couldn't stay healthy like through the whole duration of a game. I think that's what really led. I know that we're going after a few guys. I know you said that the Bills were looking at Gronk if Brady didn't come back. I know the Titans were in contention with that too.
That report was out like a couple days ago. And it came down to really the Bills and the Titans of possibly landing Gronk, but doesn't seem like that's the case now.
Yeah, so maybe we were freeing up space for a big free agent like him, but I see him going back to Tampa to play with Tom, obviously. So yeah, I think the Roger Saffold getting released is a good thing for the Titans, but I think whoever picks him up will add some depth to the O-line for sure. So I think it's good for both parties.
Yeah, I think going forward, just the amount of moves that are still to be made in this league, and
Mm,
just the constant news that is broken 24 hours. I mean, this whole Brady thing is just screwing everything up essentially, because I would think every owner out there, every GM, every coach are like, okay, he's done.
mm,
Tampa's going to fall apart. They're going to have to get rid of guys. There are people are going to want to leave.
yeah.
So that's another destination that certain free
Mhm.
agents aren't going to want to go to. So now I got to reconsider, like maybe Wagner does want to go to Tampa and
Maybe.
win a Super Bowl, play with Tom. Maybe a
Mhm.
Cohen would like a shot there. I know they have Leonard Fournette, but he might be like, okay, let's take a league minimum deal and go get myself a
Yeah.
ring.
And they
Um,
have other backs like who have come there to try to win a ring, like Giovanni Bernard.
yeah,
Uh, so like that could totally happen. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. This offseason has been nuts for
yeah, and
sure, and
And I
definitely
remember
definitely
even
with the
like going
Brady thing.
back, even
Yeah.
a guy like LaShawn McCoy. I mean,
Hmm.
he was lucky enough to get 2 Super Bowls off of going to a contending team in free agency.
Yeah.
He went to the Kansas City Chiefs, won it with them, and
Hmm.
then right after that went to Tampa Bay. So
Yeah.
now that now that Brady's back, that's gonna be pretty crazy to see.
Anything's
Obviously, like
possible.
Aaron Rodgers coming back as well too,
Yeah.
being in Green Bay full time for one more year at least. I think
Hmm.
he's just going throughout his contract. I mean, he's probably like, "Oh, I got to go through Brady again." Like, I just wanted a break. But
Hmm.
it really seems like the NFC is starting to lighten up though at the talent position.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if let's go through this right now. If you were to look at the AFC, all the quarterbacks that I think are elite fighting for a playoff spot, you're going to have, starting
Hmm.
with the North, you're going to have Burrow, you're going to have Lamar Jackson. I think the Browns, even though they did just get Amari Cooper in that trade, I don't think they're going to be able to make a big leap forward until they figure out what is going on with Baker Mayfield, how many
Yeah.
more years they want to keep
Hmm.
him, and if they are going to have to blow it up and restart again and find a franchise quarterback.
Yep.
But I think almost in each division, besides the Mahomes, Carr, Wilson, and Herbert division, you have at least 2 teams that are going to be contending for the playoffs. So you're going to
Hmm.
miss, like, those AFC teams are going to miss out. You know, there's going to be at least 4 quarterbacks that are of almost elite talent that aren't going to make it, just because of how stacked it is.
Yeah.
And going forward, I think a lot of these free agent quarterbacks are like, yeah, I don't want to go to a team in the AFC. I don't want to put myself through that. So you got like opening spots probably in New York, as in the New York Giants.
Mhm.
Obviously, we were just talking about what team were
Indy.
we just talking about? Indianapolis, but they're in the AFC. You're really the Saints, though, the Carolina Panthers, if they can get a crack at some of these quarterbacks, to upgrade from a Taysom Hill, a
Yeah.
Sam Darnold, I think they would do it in a heartbeat, because they
I
know,
agree.
okay, I really only have to deal with Matthew Stafford,
Mhm.
Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and Kyler Murray. Other than
Yeah.
that, I don't really know from the NFC who's really that threatening
I
from the
agree. Yeah.
quarterback position. So,
Mhm.
yeah, really interesting topics there. I know we got basketball coming up here in a little bit,
Yep.
but we still got about, I think, 2 minutes left here.
Okay.
So, that being said, kind of, I know we already talked about it, but that Tom Brady news, I mean, does it does it piss you off? Like, are you just angry or upset about it, or do you think it's kind of cool that he's coming back?
All right. Listen, here's my opinion on Tom Brady. So I do think he is the GOAT, but I was I was happy for the sport of football that he was finally retiring. I think it's
Yes,
time for
for
a
the
new.
sport, for the love of the game,
Yes.
like, the fact that
Yes.
he was out, oh
Yeah.
my goodness, like,
I was
yeah,
ready. Yeah. I was ready to start kind of a new generation. I mean, the last really ones from his like generation were him and Roethlisberger. Roethlisberger finally pulled the plug, and then he did. And then I was like, okay, we're ready for this new generation of quarterbacks with like Mahomes, Allen. No, he's coming back now. So, and they're going to be contenders once again if they get it everyone or most everyone back. So, it does piss me off a little bit because
Yeah.
I
I mean, for me especially, because I mean, his best performance and like numbers over his career are against the Bills. So
yes.
I'm a salty Bills fan where
Oh
I'm
yeah,
just
I
like,
know. Yeah.
even we played them last year and they beat us, and I think it
Mhm.
was some questionable calls throughout the game. Myself, as any other fan does, but I mean, just looking at his career and just how well he does. Last year, he was amazing. Like just the fact that he can still grip and rip the ball, on a rope for 30 plus yards. I mean, you mentioned Ben Roethlisberger. It was so hard to watch him play. He could not throw a ball on target with zip past 10 yards. He was just so old and he couldn't keep up. And I feel like any team that takes, that position, quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're going to be a better team right off the bat. So that adds on to my point about Russell Wilson and the AFC being so dominant. It's going to be hard for teams to get in. But yeah, going back to Brady though, you already know Gronk's coming back now. You already know.
Yeah.
So you're going to have those two guys going back at it, back and forth. And, mainly all of the NFL media are gonna be nothing but blowing
They're
this
gonna
up
be
and
all over this.
talking
Yeah.
about just a whole nother season of turning
Mhm.
on a game and be like, well, Tom
Right.
Brady is the best quarterback to
He's
ever
the
play.
best, and he's old and he's still good and all that baloney.
Yeah. But realistically, how many more years do you think he has then? Is this the last year?
I'm not gonna.
I mean, literally everybody was like, all right, this
Yeah.
is it, no matter what, even though he signed a 2-year deal. But
I think he'll go till 50. I think he'll be like he's gonna be like he wants to prove that he can play till 50 years old. That probably won't happen, but who knows? I mean, literally he retired like it feels like 2 weeks ago, and now he's back. So
well, it was crazy
it's
too
crazy.
because I literally saw him. He was at a soccer game. I forget he was going to see Cristiano Ronaldo
Yeah.
play, and you see him, and everybody's like, "Oh, there he is,
There's
the
Tom Brady,
retired quarterback and stuff." And I kind of am thinking now maybe it's something that Ronaldo said to him, where it's like, "Oh, you're really done? Like, you have nothing else to prove." Maybe it was
I think he kind of got pissed off, and then he was like,
or
yeah.
was it? Do you think it was a strategic plan by him and the Bucs organization, where they're like, maybe they all knew that? Listen, he's going to say he's retiring, but he's not.
Yeah.
Because
Well-
like if you look at the Bucs, has anybody left the Buccaneers yet that are free agents that are big money players? I know Chris
Antonio
Godwin and
Brown,
Fournette and Godwin have been out on the market forever and they haven't been claimed. Maybe they just haven't moved because they know going forward Brady was coming back this whole time.
Yeah,
and
maybe.
what a strategy it would be to mess with all these other GMs, their plans in free agency, the offseason, the draft. They'd be like, oh, Brady's out. So that means Tampa, they're losing all their guys, like I said earlier. This could have been a huge strategic move by the Bucs and Brady if that was the case. But even if it's not the case there, just the fact that it's so interesting to see what the news story will be when it's unfolded of why he decided to come back, besides him saying he's got unfinished business.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there is something else out there that
I agree
truly
with you there.
got him to go back.
My last piece on this is I kind of saw it coming in a sense, because I do think he sort of got pushed into retirement, because remember there were like a bunch of fake reports about it, and then like finally he announced it. So maybe he just he kind of got pressured into thinking about it too early, because I know he was like I'm gonna think all off season, and then like right before the season starts I'm gonna retire, and then all those reports came out, and then a few days later he finally announced it. So maybe he just thought about it more, and he was like, don't count me out yet, guys. I'm gonna make the decision now, and then I'm gonna still think about it. And then maybe he was just, after 2 months, he was like, well, retirement sucks. I want to keep doing football.
You know what I think?
Yeah.
I think the reason why he came out of retirement is because he was upset that Gronk was able to retire and come back out. So he wanted to have the same type of stats there, along with his buddy, who they've been playing with each other for over
Oh,
10 plus years
best
now.
friends.
So, the best two ever to do it. But that being said, that's going to end our football section here. And thanks for listening, Harrison. Thanks for doing this. I know you're the hockey guy, but thanks for joining me.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right, guys, really good football talk there, but now we got to get into basketball. Obviously, we've had some really big conference wins here, one of them being the Tennessee Vols, who won the SEC championship for the first time since 1979. And for more takes on Selection Sunday and basically anything basketball, we're going to break it down to, or throw it down to, Tim and Ben.
Thanks, Matt. Welcome back, everybody, to our second episode here. So a big day in the basketball world, obviously, with Selection Sunday being about 2 hours ago. It started, but ended about an hour ago. So we do have the bracket with us. We're going to start it off with going over our picks. And Tim, you want to start us off in the West region with the Gonzaga matchup?
Yeah, so Gonzaga is going to be taking on 16 seed Georgia State. And I know we've had a 16 seed upset a 1 seed in recent memory, but I don't think if this is going to be a year for that, especially not this Gonzaga team with Drew Timme and with Chet Holmgren. I think they're going to run through Georgia State. I don't think this game's going to be close outside of the first 3 minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that one. It could be the worst game of the whole tournament. It's a 1-16, like you said. We've seen it once ever. And I don't think we're going to see it again this tournament. Starting off here with Gonzaga, I think it's going to be a 30-plus point blowout. It could be more, but it's not too much of a matchup there. That's a pretty easy one. The second game we got Boise State is going up against Memphis, and now this is an interesting matchup to me. I like this one. Boise State, they've had an up and down season, but they ended up finishing pretty well, and Memphis had a lot of high expectations coming into this year. They had Jalen Duren and Amani Bates. Amani Bates was hyped up, and he really hasn't lived up to the hype. He hasn't played horrible, but he hasn't come out and been that guy that everybody thought he was going to be the best, one of the best players in college basketball. But also the other thing about Memphis is they're deep. They have 5 players in double figures and a 6th player that's at 9.2, so they almost have 6 players at double digits. While Boise State, they don't really have that. Their leading scorer, Abu Kigab, probably not pronounced that wrong, but he leads the team in points at about 15 points per game. He also leads the team in steals, so he really is shining there in Boise State alongside Mladen Armas down low, who's leading the team in rebounds. Overall, I'm going to take Boise State, though, even though they do have Jalen Duren, who's averaging 12 and 8 a game. I just think Abu is going to be too much over there, and they're going to get the win.
Yeah, I like that pick. Next game for me to pick is Connecticut versus New Mexico State. UConn, great basketball coacher. I looked all over New Mexico State's schedule for, maybe some type of challenge. I think the best teams they played all year were Washington State and Davidson, who, as we can see, is a 10 seed. I just don't think New Mexico State's seen a team like UConn all year. A little bit of a wild card as a 12 seed. 12 seeds normally are a little bit of a wild card. If there's going to be an upset in the first round, again, I'm not sure it's going to be this game. I think UConn's going to be able to take this one.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that one. This is one of the games that if you're going to see an upset between these two seeds, this would be the one. But I just don't think it's going to be enough. UConn, they're always one of the better tourney teams, and I know this year they haven't been as good as years past, but when we see them make those runs, a lot of times they're not the high seeds. They're not up there with the 1, 2, or 3 seeds. And they have some good players, so I'm going to go with UConn as well. The next game we got here, it's Arkansas and Vermont, and this is a team involves a team with Arkansas that I'm very high on. I think Arkansas could easily make a run in this tournament. They've shown it in the SEC. They've beaten teams like Auburn, but I know they got blown out by Texas A&M in the SEC tournament. But it was close for a while there, and then just the wheels fell off. It was just one of those games where it didn't work out well for them. So I'm going to go with Arkansas. I think they're a feisty team. They're a gritty team, and I really don't see them getting blown out by anybody. So I'm going to go with Arkansas in that game.
For me, I've got Alabama versus the winner of Rutgers and Notre Dame. Alabama's a good team. I love what Nate Oates has going on there, but they did underachieve a little bit this year. And this is a really tough draw. You talked about Rutgers last week as a team that you liked. They've got some impressive wins this year. Couldn't finish it out in the Big Ten tournament, lost to Iowa by 10. And Notre Dame, not as good as they are in like every other year. They're always a pretty average team, but they are a pretty frustrating team. They can get hot and shoot the ball. I mean, they blew the doors off my Florida State Seminoles earlier this year. I'm not really sure who wins that game to get in, but I think if it is Rutgers, who I think is the better of those two, I think that could be a really close first round game and maybe even give Alabama a scare.
Yeah, I like Rutgers in this one as well. I think it's gonna be a close game. I'm back and forth. I think I'm going to officially go with Bama, but I do think Rutgers is going to beat Notre Dame, and then it will be a very good game between Rutgers and Alabama in that first round. But the next game up, we got Texas Tech and Montana State. This is another one of those games where I don't think it's going to be a good game, really. It's going to be another one of those Gonzaga games where I don't think you'll see very, very close of a game. And I think Texas Tech will come out easily and win this one. So I think that one's a pretty easy book it there.
Yeah, same thing here for me with the next one, Michigan State versus Davidson. It's really hard to pick against Tom Izzo, especially in the first round of the tournament. I don't see how Davidson wins this one, especially because Michigan State, some high seeds are always, a team full of one and dones. Never really been the case with Michigan State. Guys go there and they stay for quite a while. So that's going to be a veteran team that's, been here, done that, played in a lot of big games in the Big Ten. So I'm going to go with Michigan State probably handedly in this one too.
Yeah, I was surprised to see this was a 7-10 matchup, especially with Davidson kind of struggling to win their tournament there. So I'm going to go with Michigan State as well. I don't think it will be much of a game, even though Michigan State hasn't had the year that they've had in past years. I still think they'll come out easily in this one. And then the last game in the West, we got Duke versus CSU Fullerton. And this is, again, it's a 2 versus 15. I don't really know if we have to say much more than that. It's very rare to see it. So I'm going to go with Duke in this one by a landslide. I don't think it will be close.
So Arizona is finished 31-3 this year. They're 1 seed. First year with Tommy Lloyd. Obviously, Sean Miller, the coach there for many years. And I think they were part of that FBI investigation. So this is the same team. If you correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not the biggest college basketball fan. Was this the team that had DeAndre Ayton and they lost in the first round as a 1 seed?
Yeah, they lost to UB that year in the first round.
So I don't see that happening again to a program like Arizona, who quietly is becoming like a just consistent power in basketball. I get the Pac-12 isn't what it used to be, but consistently Arizona is playing some really good ball. I think it continues here. Don't know much about their team this year, but I mean, they just ran through the season.
Yeah. Arizona again. I'd be shocked if they lost this one. It's another 1 versus 16. No matter who it is, if it's Wright State or Bryant. I mean, it's again. I mean, Arizona State. Yeah, they lost a couple years ago with Ayton, but Ayton they had that kind of scandal over there with Ayton maybe getting paid to go there or whatnot. It was a weird year, and UB honestly that year they were a very good team. They made a run. They almost beat Kentucky then in the next round or 2 rounds later. I can't remember which one. But yeah, I'm gonna take Arizona as well easily in that one. I think it should be a blowout. Next up, we got Seton Hall versus TCU. This one, I'm gonna take TCU actually. And Seton Hall, I know they've had success in years past, winning a game here and there, and they've been better than years past than they are now. But I'm going to take TCU. I mean, they have Miles. They're scoring 15 points a game. They got 2 other guys scoring in double digits. They're not a powerhouse team, but neither is Seton Hall. So I'm going to take TCU in a very close game. But I think TCU should come out on top.
So I've got Houston versus UAB, and Houston's not a team that I think is going to go very far. Just looking at their schedule, whenever they played an above average team, they lost. And for some reason, the Memphis Tigers just gave them fits this year. And Memphis, obviously, big name coach in Penny Hardaway. They've been getting a lot of big name recruits recently. Not as good this year, maybe as we thought they would be, but they gave Houston fits. Other than that, whenever Houston gets a bad team, they pretty much beat up on them. So Houston's going to win this round, but don't be shocked if they're, out before the Elite Eight, maybe even before the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I could see them being a team that kind of labeled as frauds at the end of this tournament when you look back saying, hey, why were they a 4 seed playing this team? But yeah, I'm going to take Houston in the first round at least. I mean, it's hard to say when there's an upset with a 4 seed or a 3 seed or a 2 seed or a 1 seed in the first round, just because it's so rare. I mean, obviously you see 12 and 4 seeds pretty often, but it's you got to pick the right ones, and I don't think Houston's going to be one of those teams that ends up losing as a 4 seed or 5 seed. Sorry. But then next up we got the Illini taking on Chattanooga, and this one, I mean, Chattanooga, I'm not really impressed with them. They barely won their conference, the Southern Conference. And then you got the Illini coming second in the Big Ten. I don't think this one should be close. I mean, yeah, the Illini, they've lost to Ohio State a little bit ago, but they beat up teams like Iowa, Iowa was one of the hotter teams leading into this tournament. So I think the Illini are going to come out on top in this one.
Another Big Ten team here is Michigan. They're the 11th seed going up against Colorado State. Based on just the name and the brand and who the coach is, I think a lot of people are going to pick Michigan to upset Colorado State, but I just don't see it. I talked about Michigan last week. They've got to be like possibly the most disappointing team in college basketball this year. They just don't impress me when they play. And I think because of who they're playing, there's a really good chance that they kind of overlook Colorado State, even though they're the lower seed considerably. But I know this is going to be a lot of people's hot upset pick, but it is not one of mine. I know I still haven't picked an upset, but I'm going to have Colorado State beating Michigan.
I'm actually going to take Michigan as the upset. I know it is one of those teams that they didn't live up to the expectations, but still, I think they'll squeak out at least one win in the tournament, and I think it will come against Colorado State in the first round. So it's back and forth for me, but I'm gonna go with Michigan. Next up, we got Tennessee versus Longwood, and shocker here, I'm going to take Longwood in the first round. No, I'm just kidding. I actually had to do that for Matt in the chat. I know he's listening right now, and he's a big Tennessee fan. So I'm going to take Tennessee. I don't think this should be much of a game. They've shown that they can play. They can make a run. I think Tennessee can make a run in this tournament. So yeah, Tennessee by a pretty decent margin there.
Next is everyone's favorite college basketball team. Loyola Chicago is the 10 seed taking on Ohio State. Ohio State early exit last year after a really encouraging season. I think they get that revenge this year. This is not the same Loyola Chicago team, obviously with a brand new head coach as their coach moved on to the Big 12. So no deep Loyola Chicago run this year, unfortunately. No Sister Jean in the Elite Eight. I'm going to have Ohio State, exercise some demons from last year.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that one. They're a very good team, I think, in Ohio State. I think they're another team that could, in the next round, take down Villanova, which I'll get to in a second. But Loyola Chicago, it's as much as everybody wants to see that Cinderella run again, I'd love to see it. I just unfortunately don't think it's going to happen. So they'll see a first-round exit by Ohio State. The last game here, we got Villanova versus Delaware, and Villanova was one of those teams that they didn't start off that great, but they've ended very, very well, up to a 2 seed, and I think they'll end up winning this game pretty easily again against Delaware, so that one's a pretty easy one. We'll get into the East bracket. I'll start that one off. We got Baylor versus Norfolk State, the 1 versus 16. Again, it's a number 1 versus 16. I don't think it'll be much of a game. I think they'll end up blowing them out of the water. Baylor, I think, is one of the best teams in this tournament. I think they'll go very, very far, and I think they could make a title run. So Baylor, I'm going to have it in the first round. Moving on.
Next, I've got UNC playing against Marquette. UNC's got all the momentum right now after that huge win against Duke, regardless of what happened in the ACC tournament. But I think this is where my first upset comes in terms of seeding. I like Marquette. I like what they're doing. I know they had a really disappointing end in the Big East tournament with losing to Creighton, but I think they've been a pretty consistent team all year. They have struggled with Creighton, so they better just thank God they're not playing Creighton. But I mean, they hung tough with a ranked Connecticut team early. They hung tough with a top 10 Villanova team early. They actually beat Villanova back in January. So I think this Marquette team is a little bit better than a 9 seed.
Yeah, this Marquette team, they're a team that if they didn't play North Carolina, I think I'd pick them to be an upset or maybe 2 games into an upset into the tournament. But I think North Carolina is going to come out on top on this one. I think they finished the year off on a great note, even though they didn't necessarily win the tournament. But they ended up beating Duke a little bit ago, and I think that they'll end up beating Marquette in this one. Next up, we got St. Mary's versus Wyoming, the winner of Wyoming and Indiana. And this is also going to be an upset for me. I'm going to take Wyoming. I think Wyoming is going to beat Indiana, and I think Wyoming will also beat St. Mary's in a little bit of an upset. I know St. Mary's has beat Gonzaga, but again, they're not in a big conference. Gonzaga, yes, they're a very good team, but I think it might have just been like one of those fluke games because I just don't see Gonzaga losing that game if they end up meeting down the road in this tournament. But I'm going to go with Wyoming actually, and I'm pretty high on Wyoming. I've been pretty high on them for a while. They've been up and down, but I think that they'll be able to get the job done against the St. Mary's.
So last year's, quote unquote Cinderella team almost took down Gonzaga there before Jalen Suggs hit one of the best shots in tournament history. UCLA as a 4 seed taking on Akron. I think that team has what happened last year as the biggest motivating factor in this whole tournament. I think UCLA is going to make a really deep run, and I think it's going to start with a beatdown of Akron.
Yeah, UCLA is going to be a dangerous team this tournament. I think they got a lot of talent up and down that team, and I'm going to take them as well. I don't even think Akron honestly should be in this tournament. I know they won the MAC tournament, but they played Kent State and 4 of their guys got suspended from Kent State for posting a video saying they're going to crush them or whatever it was. But if they have those 4 guys, Kent State wins, and I don't think Akron's in this tournament right now. So I'm going to take UCLA. I think that's going to be an easy one. Next up, we got Texas and Virginia Tech, and this one is also going to be an upset for me. I'm going to take Virginia Tech. We watched them yesterday win the ACC tournament. They are a very good team. I love the point guard over there. I'm blanking on his name right now, but he's got great vision. He can shoot. They have talent everywhere, I think, and I think that they can beat a team like Texas, who I think is seated way too high. So I'm going to take Virginia Tech in the upset.
They beat the hell out of Duke in that ACC tournament final. They're a fun team. Next is Purdue versus the honorary member of the Ivy League every year. This time it's Yale with a nice win over Princeton, who was the number 1 team in the Ivies this year. I know you and me talked last week how Purdue isn't really a legit team, but like we talked about before with Houston, they might lose, but it's not going to be in the round of 64. Yale may hang tough. I mean, they played Auburn this year. They lost by 22. So they don't and I think they played Iona too and lost by almost 20. So when they play, the big boys, they kind of get thrown around a little bit. So Yale happy to be here, but I don't think it's going to last more than about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with everything you just said right there. Purdue, I think they could get knocked out in the second round to Virginia Tech after Virginia Tech, I think, beats Texas. But I think they'll beat Yale. I mean, they're good. They're a good enough team to at least beat Yale, but I don't think they'll make it far in this tournament. Next up, we got Murray State and San Francisco, 2 teams that probably not a lot of people have watched. But I'm going to take Murray State, 2 smaller schools. Should be a fun matchup, but I think Murray State wins this by double digits. I think they're just a better overall team. San Fran, I think, squeaked into this tournament, even though I know that some people think that they could make a little bit of a run, although they got Kentucky if they end up beating Murray State. But I'm going to take Murray State in that one by 10+.
So Kentucky's playing St. Peter's. I'm hard on Kentucky every year. I think Coach Calipari is a great recruiter. I don't think he's a very good basketball coach when it really comes down to it. But I think like he normally does in the first round, they're going to flex their muscles. They've got, some of the best athletes in the country. I think they'll take St. Peter's and they'll take them behind the woodshed.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that one. Kentucky is another team that I think very easily could have been a 1 seed. I think that they could make a very deep run, and I think they could win it all. Next up on the other side, the last corner of the bracket, we got Kansas taking on the winner of the Texases. We got Texas Southern and Texas A&M. It's not Texas A&M that's on down below, but it's a different Texas A&M. But I'm gonna take Texas Southern in this one. It's again 2 schools that not many people have been paying attention to. Even if whoever wins this game, I think they're going to get blown out by Kansas. I don't think it'll be close, so I'm going to go with Kansas in this one pretty easily.
So Creighton is playing San Diego State. I kind of want to take Creighton here. I talked about how they had some really impressive wins this year. They also had some incredibly frustrating losses. But I look at just a couple days ago, this team took Providence and beat them by almost 30. So I think they're on a little bit of a run right now, even though they didn't win the conference, but they held Villanova to 54 points in that game. They just couldn't put the ball in the basket. I think Creighton is definitely a first round team that could get an upset. And I believe they would play Kansas in the next round.
Yeah.
So
yep.
I think that their run probably ends there, but I think they could upset San Diego State.
Yeah, I think they can as well. I'm going to actually take Creighton as well. I think San Diego State, I was very back and forth in this game. San Diego State, I think, is a very good team, strong team. But again, Creighton, like you just mentioned, they're a sneakily good team. They're not a team that you'll look at and be like, oh, I'm going to expect Creighton to make a run. But who knows, they could. But I think they'll at least get past this first round with San Diego State. Next up, we got Iowa versus Richmond, and I'm going to take Iowa in this one pretty easily. Iowa has been one of the hottest teams in college basketball as of late. I think they continue this run, and I think they honestly get past the winner of Providence and South Dakota State after they beat Richmond here. So Iowa could be a team that they could make a very deep run.
Yeah, and we had just mentioned Providence recently lost a game by 30 to Creighton. I think that's your prototypical late season loss for a team to whip back into shape. And I think they can flex their muscles a little bit against South Dakota State and get a very comfortable first round win.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you on that one. But like I said, I think Iowa will take them out in the second round. It will be a good game in that second round, but I'm gonna say the first round is gonna be 10 plus, 15 plus, maybe even 20. But next up, we got LSU versus Iowa State. LSU, they had higher expectations coming into this year, and they didn't really live up to them. But I am going to take them in this first round against Iowa State. I just don't think Iowa State has the firepower for it. And LSU, I think, that even though they'll win this game, I think they'll end up being a second or third round exit, even if they get past this first round. So I'm going to take LSU.
So Wisconsin versus Colgate, I think, is one of the bigger games that could end in an upset. You know, one of the higher seeds in Wisconsin. They were really hot, and then they lose games to Nebraska and Michigan State to finish out the season. And that Michigan State loss was in the Big Ten tournament. So Wisconsin not as hot as they've been in recent weeks. So I think they could be on upset alert. I don't know if Colgate ends up getting it done, but I think if there were to be a really big upset to happen in the first round, this is the one to watch.
Yeah, I could see a Colgate upset here, but I'm gonna side with Wisconsin. I think they might struggle in the first half, but by the second half, I think Wisconsin will have worn them down. But the next matchup we got is USC versus Miami, your University of Miami. And I'm going to take USC in this one. USC, I think, is also a very sneaky team. They're a 7 seed, but I think they could make a run. And especially with Auburn slumping recently, if they get to that second round, I think they could beat Auburn as much as it hurts to say, being an Auburn fan. But they've beaten teams. They've beaten UCLA, and they also lost to them by 10. But they've been there in close games. They barely lost to Arizona a few weeks ago in February, and then they did get blown out by them even in March. But still, I think that they're a very sneaky team, and I think they'll get past Miami and go on to play Auburn in that second round.
Hey, you don't have to convince me. If you want to pick the Hurricanes to lose, you can do that every day. I'll spend an hour talking bad about the Hurricanes. Auburn versus Jacksonville State. Correct me if I'm wrong. Jacksonville State is here because the team that won their conference isn't allowed to compete in the postseason for 4 years after joining D1.
Yeah, I believe that is exactly it.
Yeah, this feels like an Auburn very, quick, easy. Bruce Pearl's team's probably going to come out here and let him have it.
Yeah. It's been a rocky run the past few weeks for Auburn, but I think that they'll also just blow them out. So that'll do it for the NCAA talk. Tim, if you want to get into our next little topic here.
So we can touch on it really quick. Greg Popovich has officially become the winningest head coach in the history of the NBA, passing Don Nelson. I believe he did it in considerably less time than Don Nelson, too. Pop has really only been a head coach for 25 years.
Yeah.
And Don Nelson was coaching for almost like 40 years, I think.
Yeah.
So really, really impressive by Pop. Obviously, the Spurs, one of the greatest dynasties in the history of sports. If the Spurs dynasty wouldn't have ended, I mean, he probably would have had this record last year. And considering that he did this, and I talked about this with a tweet about Kobe that happened a couple weeks ago, talking about how many 50-win teams he took down in the playoffs. Popovich was able to get all these wins with shortened seasons in 1999, 2012, 2020, and 2021. Like 4 of his NBA seasons have been shortened, not to mention the 5 championships to go with it, playing in the 2000s Western Conference, which, as we know, was an absolute gauntlet. You had to deal with 2 separate Laker, mini dynasties. You had to deal with, teams like the Suns, the Mavericks, the Rockets had like 3 different iterations of good teams. The Jazz were always sticking around, the Blazers. You can go on and on and on. And some of the players that he took down in the playoffs, I mean, you name it, Pop is taking them down in the playoffs outside of guys like Michael Jordan, who just never got to play. But he's taking down your Kobe's, your LeBrons, your Dirks, all those guys. So hell of a career by Pop. I believe it's going to end relatively soon. I don't think we think Pop is going to coach for more than maybe 3 or 4 years. San Antonio, obviously not what they used to be, but very good for Pop to see him finally get the record.
Yeah, it's awesome to see, and it's one of those things where you got to kind of you can't take coaches like that for granted. I mean, four-time All-Star coach, 3-time Coach of the Year, gold medalist, won 67% of his games. His coaching tree is insane with Doc Rivers, Steve Kerr, Monty Williams. I mean, the list goes on. The amount of Hall of Famers or arguable Hall of Famers that he's produced. I mean, Tim Duncan, David Robinson, Tony Parker, Ginobili, Kawhi's going to be there. I mean, he's the best coach of all time, and I don't think many people will argue with you on that one. So, Greg Popovich, congrats to him, and hopefully we see him for a few more years, but yeah, might not see him for too much longer. But we're going to also talk about one more thing real quick before getting into our top 5. We talked about a little bit last week, the trade between these 2 teams, but it's the Philadelphia 76ers and the Brooklyn Nets. They played the other day, and needless to say, it was kind of an embarrassment for Philly. Brooklyn wiped them out. Harden played horrible, had 4 turnovers. It looked like he gave up halfway through the game. He only had 11 points, did put up 6 and 5 for rebounds and assists, but it was a pretty ugly game. What do you think of the outcome, and does it change your thoughts on the trade at all?
I'm still in favor of the trade for both sides, but at the same time, I need to see Ben Simmons on the basketball court before I can judge this trade. I know it felt good for him to win the game, but I think it'd feel a lot better if he actually played. For James Harden, I mean, sometimes he's going to have games like this. The way he plays is just like that. I know people brought up, I saw it on the internet a couple times, how his play style is conducive to winning games, but it may not be conducive to winning championships. And to me, I say we'll see. It's only been 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks he's been with Philly.
Yeah.
He's also already missed like 2 games. So we'll see what this looks like in the playoffs, but it's better than just having Ben Simmons on your roster and not playing him. Like, I'd definitely rather have MVP James Harden. But I think that notion of his play style may not be a championship play style. Starting to feel true.
Yeah. Well, I think he'll fit right in with that team. I think, like I said last week, but for Philly, they struggled again today. I don't know what the final score was. I think it might not even be over yet, but it's a little alarming seeing James Harden. Obviously, he's taken a few steps back since his days in Houston, but he's still James Harden. So you can't really say that they lost the trade just yet, or you can't say who won it, who lost it. We'll see the rest of the year. But all right, let's get into then the around the block. We're gonna go around the block, finding our top 5 players of the week, and you're gonna start it off this week since I started off last week. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, at number one, who else but Mr. 50 points himself? LeBron James has been on a tear this week, keeping the Lakers' heads above water. I don't know if you knew this. I think it was January 27th, the Lakers were the 9th seed in the West, and then they lost, I think, 13 of their next 17, and they were still the 9th seed in the West. So the Lakers aren't very good, but neither is the Western Conference right now. I think if they get in the play-in, it's going to be impossible to pick against them. I mean, they're the Lakers. They'll have Anthony Davis back, but he's been unreal this week, doing everything he can to keep the Lakers' heads above water. I don't think they've won a game after the All-Star break where he hasn't scored 50.
Yeah,
I think their only win since the All-Star breaker is 50-point games.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Unreal week from him.
Yeah, he's just showing. I mean, you're never going to see it again. I don't think we'll ever see this again. He is 37 years old, putting up 2 50-point games in 1 week. He's to me the greatest of all time. Maybe we'll get into a topic of discussion in another episode about that. But it's amazing to see what he's doing, and he deserves to be number 1 on this list this week. But number 2, we're going to get on to number 2. We got Luka Doncic of the Dallas Mavericks. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the league. I think he should be the MVP this year. He's averaging 28, 9, and 9 on the year, and they're 5th in the Western Conference, a game behind 4th. And who's he doing it with as his second best player? Spencer Dinwiddie or Jalen Brunson? I mean, yeah, they're good players, but are they that good to be 5th or 4th in the stacked Western Conference that we like to call it? But this past week, I mean, he's put up 35, 31, 30, and 26. So he's been balling, along with he put up 35 and 16 rebounds against the Jazz, along with 7 assists alone. So like, that's one game. And if you watch the game today, you could see against the Celtics, he ended up getting hurt early on, played through it, still dropped 26, 8, and 8. And really willed that team to victory, because you could see he was hurt and they were struggling anytime he was not on the floor. So Luka Doncic, number 2, future of the league, just like we talked about last week with Ja. It's going to be him and Ja for a long time. So there's number 2.
Number 3, I mean, who else? He's probably going to be on this list every time we do it. Giannis Antetokounmpo. I'll read you the numbers in his 3 games this week. On Tuesday against OKC in a big win, 39, 7, and 7 with 3 steals. He shoots 68%. And then against the Hawks in another win, he goes 43, 12, and 5 with a steal, shooting 68%. And then on Saturday, a loss to the Warriors. This is his down game of the week. You ready? 31 points, 8 rebounds with a block, and he shot 53%. The lowest percentage he shot all week was 53. All right. That's by 15%. He was averaging 68% shooting before Saturday night for this week. I mean, he's going to be a mainstay of this segment, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he'll be here pretty regularly. I mean, he's Giannis. There's not much more to be said. He's still getting better, it seems, every single game. So he'll be on here a lot. But moving on to number 4, kind of surprise on this list. And now his team didn't do that great, but it's going to be Julius Randle. He's kind of been balling this past week. They did go 2-2, but these are all away games. I'll remind you, this is a road trip, and he's doing this. He dropped in a win against the Kings. He dropped 46 and 10 on 18 for 31 shooting, 8 for 16 from 3. In a win against Dallas, he puts up 26, 8, 5, 8 for 19 from the field, and 3 for 7 from the field. And they blew him out. They beat him by 40. I mean, it wasn't even close. And then you get the loss to Memphis, who Memphis is a very good team. We're going to be talking about them a lot, I have a feeling, in a very close game, a 4-point loss. And he dropped 36, 12, and 6, along with 2 steals and 2 blocks. Shot almost 50% from the field. Did shoot exactly 50% from 3. And then the last game today, it was a very, very good game. They fought back. They kept fighting throughout this whole game. They ended up losing by 3 because KD decided he was going to go ahead and drop 56 today, 54, something around there. But, I mean, Randall still had a great day with 26 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and shot over 50%, and almost shot 50% from 3. But Julius Randle, a phenomenal week, and it's a good sign for Knicks fans. who thought that his contract was one of the worst after his start to this year.
Yeah, to round out the top 5 this week, Jason Tatum just casually averaged 32 points a game this week with, I think, 8 rebounds. Am I wrong? 8 rebounds? I think it is 8 rebounds.
Yeah, it is.
It feels like he's doing this every week. Celtics struggled early on, and then Tatum and Brown started to put the ball in the bucket at a higher clip. And now all of a sudden they are one of the hottest teams in the league. And a 2-1 week, and their only loss being to another player on our list, Luka Doncic, by 3. So hell of a week from Tatum, like he's been doing usually. He hasn't scored, but before today, where he only scored 21, I mean, he hadn't scored less than 30 in like 2.5 weeks.
Yeah. Tatum's been on fire this past week, and he almost moved up higher on this list, but he almost fell off this list too. But he ended up staying on at number 5. But we do each have two honorable mentions that we got. I'll go with my first 2. I got Kyrie Irving dropped 50 against the Hornets. I mean, he didn't have the greatest overall week, but I mean, a 50-point game. He shot 15 for 19 from the field, 9 for 12 from 3. I mean, you can't really get better shooting performance from someone, and it was a thing of beauty to watch. And next up, we got Jokic, Nikola Jokic. Who else? I mean, he's the MVP. He could be MVP again this year. Averaged 30, 14, and 9. You'd say, well, how did he not get on here? Well, because 1, his team didn't really do that great, and 2, he didn't make a single 3 this whole week. I mean, I don't know how many he shot total, but I know against the Warriors, he went 0 for 8 from 3. That is not efficient. I got to penalize him for the inefficiency on the court this past week, but still putting up great numbers, and we'll definitely see him on this week before. So you go ahead with your 2 whenever you're ready.
One of mine's Joel Embiid. As we speak, he's dropping, I think, about 40 points in an overtime game against the Magic. Great week, just not really good enough to get on this list. And then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had a crazy 33 and 14 game this week. He misses getting on the list because the last time he played, he went 2 for 15 with only 8 points and 4 turnovers. But before that, I mean, that 33 and 14 game was something special.
Yeah, he had a great week. And before we head off here, we're going to do some single game shout outs because there was some great games or great performances this past week by some shocking people. So my first one is Gary Trent Jr. had 42 points against the Suns, went 8 for 11 from 3, 13 from 21 overall, and he added an 8 board. So Gary Trent Jr. has been up and down this year, kind of dropping 40, dropping 30, and then all of a sudden dropping 10. But this game, he decided to drop 42, which I believe was a career high for him. I could be wrong, but I believe that was. So Gary Trent Jr. And then secondly, I got Josh Hart, who had 44 against the Wizards yesterday and added in 8 rebounds, 6 assists, and 4 steals. And I know that they had nobody playing. Simmons was out yesterday for Portland, but still, I mean, Josh Hart, a guy who sometimes you see put up 5 points every once in a while, but to drop 44 is just a sight to see. So those are my 2 single game shout outs.
Speaking of career highs, Jordan Clarkson did have his career high against the Kings the other night, 45 points from the reigning 6th man of the year. So that was really impressive to see. Came after a challenge by Mike Conley, who challenged him to go out and get 40 that night, and he went out and got 45. Also, Darius Garland, I mean, one of the breakout stars of the league this year, 41 points, 13 assists. People were ready to write this guy off after his rookie year and saying that the whole point guard situation in Cleveland wasn't working out. He has stepped up big time this year and is one of the big reasons that the Cavs are going to be playing in the playoffs without LeBron James for the first time since, I believe, before either one of us were born.
Yeah, it's good to see things in Cleveland are going good. But that's going to do it for us. We'll see you guys next week. We got another big week coming up. Obviously, March Madness starting. It's going to be a great March for basketball. And be sure to follow our social medias to see the rest of our brackets. We're going to post the entire thing out there. So we're going to head back to Matt. And go ahead, Matt.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. That's about do it for us here at The Block for episode 2. Obviously, everybody did a really good job of telling what's going on in the world there, especially Ben and Tim there, wrapping up the NCAA tournament bracket that was just released. Obviously, had some conversation about the hockey and the Tim Hortons Heritage Classic, where the Sabres won 5-2. And then baseball getting back into action once again. Games will be starting April 7th. And then football, Tom Brady with his return. So those are our headlines to end the show today. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next Sunday at the Block.